Hello, my name's John, and this is going to be, and it will be quite brief, a brief video lesson as an extension of the lesson I did yesterday on diminished scales over dominant chords. And we predominantly, excuse the pun, looked at this shape, which is a dominant chord with a root note on the G string. So I'm sure you've all played that before. Top 4 strings, root note on a G string. So the notes are 5, 1, 3, 7. And we talked about the diminished pattern that's on the screen fitting in perfectly without changing position over that chord. So the top 4 strings in that pattern from our first finger is simply the pattern on the screen, which fits in perfectly over the chord. And then I continued on to some other chord shapes, which I didn't plan to do, but I just did. Because this shape will fit over any dominant chord physical pattern that we can play on the guitar. And fit over without moving or moving a maximum of 1 fret. So we're never more than one fret away from the right diminished scale pattern, which is very convenient, especially if this pattern is new to you. The reason for that is that diminished scales repeat every 3 frets. So whatever dominant shape we play, we're never more than 1 fret away. And with the chord I just said, of course, we're smack bang on the same position. And with this chord, I'm sure we've all played that before, root note on the E strings, standard dominant shape. Again, the same pattern as on the screen is smack bang over that shape without changing position. So we've got the same pattern there. It just so happens that that shape fits in perfectly with the same pattern that we did with the other shape, because it repeats every 3 frets. The only difference is the chord tones in that chord will actually be different in relation to the dominant scale than the chord tones in that chord. But we don't really need to think too much about that, really. So those 2 shapes, we played the same pattern, smack bang over it, which is very easy to practice, of course. Another dominant shape, this one, root note on the A string. Yes. Straightforward dominant shape, bar shape if you want to call it that. Root note on the A string. Now with this chord shape, we use the same pattern as on the screen, but this time we move 1 fret to the left. So all we do is move our first finger 1 fret to the left, and here we are into the same diminished scale pattern. 1 fret to the left, and then back to the chord shape. Another chord shape, which is, say, this one, root note on the D string. With this chord shape, we just move 1 fret to the right. So there's the chord shape with the root note, 1 fret to the right, into the scale shape, and then 1 fret back to the left, back into the chord, into the diminished scale shape, and then back into the chord. 1 fret to the right, that movement there. Chord, scale pattern, chord, scale pattern, then back into the chord. Same with making the dominant chord into a dominant flat 9 by just moving 1 fret to the right and putting in our diminished shape, which comes from the diminished scale. That shape, 1 fret to the right, back. And we can do that with all these dominant chords. We just move to the 1 fret to the left, 1 fret to the right, or we don't move at all, and we've got that diminished chord shape as well, which if we keep the root of the dominant chord is just a dominant 7 flat 9, that's all. But that's the way it works harmonically. And I think calling it a dominant 7 flat 9 is more of a modern thing than calling it a diminished chord, a semitone above or 2 semitones below. At least when we go from that 7 chord to that, we can still keep the root note of the original chord and call it a 7 flat 9. 7, 3, 5, flat 9. There you go, I hope that all makes sense. I think that's it, just dominant chord shapes with the diminished scale pattern, either in the same position, which is convenient, or 1 fret to the left or 1 fret to the right. It should never be a big shift, because of course, if we're not looking at the neck, it's always risky, isn't it? It's risky doing a position shift of more than, say, a couple of frets. Unless we're looking at the guitar, of course. But if we're reading music, we don't really want to be looking at the guitar, do we? So it's very convenient to be. That's why we tend to play, our chords in the same position. We don't have to, but that's very convenient, isn't it? Then into the diminished. Resolving to the 1. So there's a 2, 5, and if we want to put the diminished notes, resolving to the 1. So the whole point in the diminished scale notes is that it adds non-diatonic notes to the dominant chord, which have tension, which lead into the 1 chord, into the home chord. It's perfectly fine to play just dominant scale over dominant chord, or mixolydian scale over mixolydian chord, with no particular tension, and that's fine. But obviously a jazz approach involves using alternate notes, outside notes, whatever you want to call them, notes that are not diatonic to that dominant chord, which give it that jazzy sound. 2, 5. Hope that makes sense. And that was quite brief. That's unusual for me. Quite a brief lesson. Okay, cheers. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Sorry, how could I forget? How could I forget this shape? This is another dominant chord shape. Root notes on the A string and the B string. Very common shape. Now, with this dominant chord shape, we simply move 1 fret to the right. And then 1 fret to the left to get back into the chord. So 1 fret to the right, and then back to the chord. 1 fret to the right, 1 fret to the left. Simple. As you can see on the screen, exactly the same pattern. That's it. So that was the one that I forgot. And they're all the main dominant chord shapes. And we're playing over them with exactly the same diminished pattern, so it's not hard really. If we associate each chord with the diminished scale pattern, either on the same fret, or 1 fret to the left, or 1 fret to the right, as I've explained. Okay, thanks a lot, and yes, bye-bye.